Hey class, so today's focus is going to be the 7th grade Expressions and Equations Standard 4, Part A. And we're going to be talking about the part that is how can I solve equations. So this video will be about solving equations. So before just diving right off into solving multi-step equations, which is kind of what your 7th grade standard is getting you to, let's take a step back to 6th grade when you just solved one-step equations. So let's kind of talk about what we're trying to do here. So to solve an equation, you must isolate the variable and keep each side of the equation balanced. So by isolating the variable, that means we're trying to get that letter in the equation by itself so we know what the value of it is. Once we get it to x equals a number, we know what x is. So we will solve this through using inverse operations. So the inverse operation of addition is subtraction. The inverse operation of subtraction is addition. If we're talking about multiplication and division, they are inverse operations of each other as well. So for this first little problem here, let me kind of label a few things or kind of talk about a few things. So x would be our variable. And that's what we're going to try to isolate. Okay, that's our variable. And x is what we're going to be trying to isolate. Now, by keeping the equation balanced and keeping each side of the equation balanced, that means whatever we do to one side of the equal sign, we must do to the other side of the equal sign. And to help me kind of see this, I like to draw a line down my equal sign. So to get x by itself in this problem, I have to get rid of this plus 2. So I'm going to use my inverse operation. To undo adding 2, I'm going to subtract 2. Now to maintain the balance of the equation, I also have to subtract 2 from this other side. So now when I subtract 2 from this side, they will cancel and go to 0. So now I'm just left with x. Bring down my equal sign. And then 10 minus 2 leaves me with 8. So now I have solved this one-step equation, and now I know that the value of x is equal to 8. And one thing I love about solving equations is you can go back and you can check to see if you've actually gotten the correct answer. So to check my work, I'm just going to kind of come down here to the side. I'm going to do it in, we'll do it blue. So I'm going to put, like, check it. So let's check it. I'm going to put 8 in place of x and see if I get a true equation. So I'm going to say 8 plus 2, and does that equal 10? It sure does, and 10 equals 10. So this is correct. So my answer for x equals 8 is correct. So the value of x for my variable is 8. And I'm going to go through a few more examples because I know it's been a while since you've seen equations. So just really quickly, I'm going to go through a few examples of one-step equations because we have a lot more to get to in this video. Alright, so really quickly, 4x equals 16. So if a number is directly on a variable like we have here, 4 is directly on the letter x, that is the same as 4 being multiplied times x, and that is equal to 16. So now for me to undo this operation that's being done, we're going to do the opposite, or first let me draw my line to keep it balanced. I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying by 4, and I'm going to divide both sides by 4. So now I'm left with this side cancels out and leaves me with x equals 16 divided by 4 is 4. So my answer here is x equals 4. And I can go back and check my work and plug in 4 for the variable x. 4 times 4 does equal 16, so my answer is correct. X equals 4 is my final answer. Now if I'm looking at x plus 9 equals 13, again I'm going to draw my line so I can help keep my equation balanced. So now the operation that needs to be done to get undone to get x by itself is plus 9. So to undo adding 9, I'm going to subtract 9. And if I do it to one side, I must also do it to the other to keep it balanced. So I'm not changing any values here. So now I'm left with x on this side equals 13 minus 9 is 4. So again, x equals 4. Alright, number 3, we have subtraction here. So we have x minus 8 equals 14. My variable is x. I have to undo that subtracting 8 to get x by itself. So to undo subtracting 8, I'm going to add 8. And then I'm going to add 8 to 14 as well. So that's going to leave me with x equals 22. Alright, and then my last example has a little bit of division going on. So this is x divided by 5 equals 13. So again, I'm going to draw my line so I can keep it balanced. So now to isolate x, or to get it by itself, I have to undo dividing by 5. The inverse of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. So I'm going to multiply each side by 5. This side cancels and leaves me with just x equals 13 times 5 is 65. And that is how you solve a one-step equation. So that should seem very familiar from 6th grade, because that's what you spent a good bit of time on in 6th grade when you talked about solving equations. So let's move into the 7th grade standards, and that is getting into solving two-step equations. So to solve an equation, you must, again, you're still trying to isolate the variable and keep each side of the equation balanced. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take what we just did on solving one-step equations, and we're just going to add one more tiny step. So if you'll notice, the inverse operations are still the same. Addition and subtraction are inverses of each other. Multiplication and division are inverse operations of each other. And then to solve two-step equations, we're just going to have two simple steps. First, you're going to undo any addition or subtraction, and then you're going to undo the multiplication or the division. So I'm going to show you a quick example here. So the two-step equation we have is 5x plus 2 equals 10. So again, I have to keep it balanced. I have to keep each side of the equation balanced. So I'm going to draw my line down my equal sign to show my sides. And then step 1, I undo any addition or subtraction. So I'm going to circle my addition here. So I have to undo adding 2, and I'm going to do that by subtracting 2. So I'm going to take and I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. When I do that, my adding 2 and subtracting 2, they cancel and just leave me with 5x. And then 10 minus 2 is 8. And this is not going to come out to be a nice, pretty answer like I'd hoped, but I just kind of came up with this. Now I have to my variable is not isolated. I still have an operation happening to my variable of x. I have 5 times x. So I need to get rid of the multiplying by 5. So to undo multiplying by 5, I'm going to divide by 5. So I'm going to divide this side by 5, and that leaves me with x. So then I also have to divide 8 by 5. Let me see what kind of answer I get there. And that's going to give me 1.6, or 1 6/10. And so that's how you're going to solve a two-step. You're going to do it the same way each time. You're going to undo addition or subtraction, and then you're going to undo multiplication or division. Alright, so solve each two-step equation below. So let's look at a few more examples here. So my first example is 10 plus 3k equals 22. And I like this example because it's not in this typical order that we see it in. It's kind of rearranged a little bit. But notice the steps are still going to be the same. Step 1, undo any addition or subtraction being done to the variable. So the addition that we actually see here, so let me draw my line to keep it balanced. we actually see that 10 is being added to 3k, and it's a positive 10. So to get rid of that positive 10, I'm going to have to subtract 10. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 10. That's going to go to 0, or cancel as I say, and leave me with 3k. And then I have to keep it balanced, so I also have to subtract 10 from the other side of the equal sign. So 22 minus 10 leaves me with 12. Bring down my equal sign. So I've kept it balanced by doing the subtracting 10 on both sides, and I've gotten rid of, I've undone adding 10 by subtracting 10. So here we go. I still don't have my variable k isolated, so I need to get rid of the 3 that's being multiplied to the k, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And this is step 2. So that leaves me with k equals 4. And again, the good thing about equations is you can go back and plug in your answer to see if you got it right. So I can take my original equation just to check, add 3, and then we think we got that k was equal to 4, so I'm going to plug in a 4. And then I should get 22 if I'm correct. So I'm going to say 3 times 4 is 12, bring down my plus 10, and that does equal 22, so my answer is correct. So k equals 4 is my final answer, and we just checked it and it was correct. So we did a good job. Alright, number 2, we are going to first pick out my variable, which is the letter P. And then step 1, I'm going to do any addition or subtraction. So this problem, I have subtraction. Alright, I have minus 5 here. So to undo subtracting 5, I must add 5. So I'm going to add 5 to this side. That's going to go to 0 or cancel. And then I have to add 5 to the other side. So 19 plus 5 gives me 24. And I'm left with 4p on this side. Alright, so now I'm down to my one-step equation of 24 equals 4p. So to isolate p, I'm going to divide both sides by 4 to keep it balanced. This goes to 1 and leaves me with just p equals 24 divided by 4 equals 6. So 6 equals p, which is just the same thing as p equals 6. It doesn't matter which way you write it. Alright, number 3. Again, we're solving a two-step equation here, so I'm going to follow step 1. I'm going to do any addition or subtraction that I see being done to the variable. So here I see that I am subtracting 8. So to undo the subtracting 8, I'm going to add 8. To keep it balanced, I must do it to both sides of the equal sign. So these cancel and leaves me with r divided by 2. And then 16 plus 8 gives me 24. And then lastly, I have to isolate my variable. I have to undo, step 2, undo or multiplication or division. Here my variable is being divided by 2, so the opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2. So I'm going to multiply 24 times 2. So this side leaves me with r equals 24 times 2 is 48. So my final answer is r equals 48. And that is how you solve two-step equations. Step 1, undo addition or subtraction using inverse operations. Step 2, undo any of your multiplication or division using inverse operations. Alright, and our last as far as we're going in this video is we're going to solve multi-step equations. So this is going to be equations that involve distributive property. So to solve an equation, we're still sticking to that same concept. We must isolate the variable and keep each side of the equation balanced. Alright, so this one we have 3 steps here, kind of 3.5, 4 steps. So step 1, you're going to distribute and combine like terms. Step 2, you're going to undo any addition or subtraction. And step 3, you're going to undo any multiplication or division. So we're really just taking it one more step further from the previous examples. So let me do kind of a refresher. Alright, so I'm going to distribute. And this is probably not going to wind up. Let me just move on to the examples. So this is what distributive property looks like. So I'm going to kind of show you this first step. So distribute the 5. I'm going to multiply each term in the parentheses times 5. So 5 times x is 5x. 5 times 2 is 10. Well, we can go ahead and do this. Alright, so just bring down my equals 10. Because it's not being multiplied by 5, it's just on the other side of the equal sign. And now I'm just back to the two-step equation that I solved on the previous slide. So now I undo my addition that I have. So I'm going to undo adding 10. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line here and keep it balanced. So I'm going to subtract 10 from this side. And that leaves me with 5x. Now to keep it balanced, I have to subtract 10 from the other side of the equal sign. So 10 minus 10 is equal to 0. And that's okay. We'll just write our 0. And then now we still have the variable is not isolated. So now I'm going to have to divide by 5 to get the variable isolated. So I'm going to divide over here by 5. So I'm left with x equals, and then 0 divided by 5 is just 0. So x equals 0. So that wasn't the greatest example, but it wasn't bad either, because it is okay to divide 0 by a number, and you're just going to get 0. Alright, so let's go through a few quick examples of solving multi-step equation. And again, you're just going to kind of follow the same steps each time. So it may help you to kind of jot down those steps from the previous slide. And just each time you're going through them. Step 1, distribute. Step 2, undo addition or subtraction. Step 3, undo multiplication or division. It's very repetitious. Alright? So let's go through our steps. So step 1, I see that I have a number on the parentheses and I need to distribute. So I'm going to multiply each term in the parentheses by 4. So 4 times 5x is 20x. Plus 4 times 6 is 24. And that is still going to equal 12. Now I'm down to my two-step equation. So I'm going to keep my equation balanced. I'm going to draw my line down my equal sign so I can see that I'm doing it to both sides and keeping it balanced. First, undo addition or subtraction. So here we have adding 24. So I'm going to undo that by subtracting 24 from both sides. What I do to one side, I must do to the other side of the equal sign. That goes to 0 and leaves me with 20x equals 12 minus 24 gives me negative 12. So that brings in a little bit of our integer operations. So you're not always going to get just this pretty answer, as you can tell. And that's okay, because being in 7th grade, we're learning how to deal with these not so pretty numbers. Alright, and then our next step is still to undo, or to isolate the variable. So we need to undo multiplication or division. Here we have 20 multiplying times x, so I'm going to divide both sides by 20. And again, it's not the prettiest answer, but it's okay. You could actually type that into your calculator and get a decimal answer of negative 6/10. Okay, negative 6/10. Or you could have just simplified your fraction. So I'll kind of talk you through that. So I noticed that they have a common factor of 4. Just right off the top of my head. So that's going to leave me with negative 3/5. So So you could have left it in either form. You could have typed it in and made it a decimal, or you could have simplified your fraction and gotten -3/5. Either way is fine. And depending on if it's a multiple choice question that you see, you may have to do one or the other, just depending on what you're given. Alright, so my next problem, I'm going to again follow the same 3 steps as I did in my first problem. I'm going to first distribute and combine like terms, so 6 times x is 6x, minus 6 times 5 is 30, and that's going to equal 18. Next, step 2, undo any addition or subtraction. So here I'm subtracting 30, so I need to undo that by adding 30. I'm going to do it to both sides to keep that equation balanced. This cancels and goes to 0, and that leaves me with 6x equals 48. Alright, and then my last step is to undo multiplication or division. So here we have multiplication. So to undo my multiplication, I'm going to divide by 6. And again, I have to do it to both sides to maintain that balance. This cancels and leaves us with just x equals 48 divided by 6 gives me 8. So x equals 8. My last example is -3 times 2x minus 4 equals 18. So first I'm going to distribute. So -3 times 2x gives me -6x. Then there's a couple of ways you can look at this. Now remember that subtraction sign can be used as subtraction or a negative. So I can say -3 times -4 and get +12. So don't forget those integer rules for multiplying. Okay, don't forget those integer rules there. So be careful. Remember that subtraction can be viewed as a subtraction sign or a negative. So be careful. And that's going to be equal to 18. Alright, now we're back down to a 2-step equation. So we can get down to undoing the addition or subtraction. So I can see that 12 is being added, so I need to subtract 12 to undo it. 18 minus 12 leaves me with 6. My adding 12 and subtracting 12 cancels to 0 and leaves me with -6x equals 6. Then my last step is to undo multiplication or division. So here the 6 is being multiplied, so I'm going to divide by -6. And that's going to cancel and leave me with x. And then +6 divided by -6 leaves me with -1. So x equals -1. Alright, so some additional videos you can be found if you're still kind of unsure or would just like to see more. You can always go to YouTube and look up Math Antics solving equations. That's what I typed in here on YouTube. And then it'll pull up a long list of videos here. These first few right here would probably be the best, our first 3, because you've got solving basic equations part 1 and part 2, and then you have solving 2-step equations. So all of these would be great videos. I really like Math Antics because they are more animated here and they kind of break everything down in more ways than I'm able to with what I'm given. So if you're still not quite sure, hop on YouTube, check out these videos from Math Antics. And that is all for today, folks.